Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Well, it's, as usual, Sew Confident month, and this is November, so we are promoting the Mayfair coat starting last week, and I am filming the video on Friday, and then a week from Friday you will see the video. So I'm going to show you the coats. We have the Mayfair made up in two different colorways of a rainwear. And this is a really interesting rainwear from Japan. It's lightweight, super lightweight, doesn't really wrinkle. It's totally water repellent, and it's polyester. So you're going to learn how to work with a rainwear type fabric in the video. Seam finishes, how to construct this really interesting collar that's actually in two pieces and open between the two layers, how to make an inverted pleat, how to construct this very unique pocket that's in the seam, has snap closures, and how to hem two different kinds of hems on this. There's a double fold hem down the center front and a more traditional hem along the bottom. So we have two kit variations. Both of them have the white and camel, or white and black. So check out the monthly class. If you're a yearly member, of course you will get this automatically. And the class will be available on the 18th of November. But today, because it's chilly, we're talking about sweater knits. We're finally into our fall and winter category of fabrics. I am particularly interested in soft and comfortable and warm, but not too warm and nothing scratchy. And so I've pulled together an assortment of solid color knits that I think you're really going to be interested in today. And I've made a couple of Madrid tops that I think are quite unique. We don't talk about the Madrid pattern very much, but it is a very unique pattern. So I have it on as if you would take it right out of the package and make it, and it buttons up clear to the neck. It has a couple of buttons at the collar, so it has this wonderful funnel neck. So you could wear it like this. I tend to wear it more open, but it really looks good when it's up. It feels good too. I'm not sure why I'm not wearing it, except I have a really great necklace on today, so I thought I would show off my necklace. But you can see that it's very asymmetric. The left side is very different than the right side. The right side's fairly short. Left side is very much on the angle. There's a nice opening on the side with a deep, wide vent, long sleeves, and so forth. I've made this in a lot of different fabrics, actually. I've made it in linen for summer with shorter sleeves. I've made it in chiffon with serged edges. So it's the kind of garment that you can make in lots and lots of different fabrics. And you can wear it as a blouse, a sweatshirt sort of thing, or even as a jacket. So, we're going to talk about sweater knits specifically today. And there are a couple of places where you can get some more knowledge about working with sweater knits. One is in my Sewing Knits from Fit to Finish book. There's a little section on sewing sweater knits in here, but all of the techniques that have to do with sewing knits, of course, apply to sweater knits as well. To be more specific, you can go to Craftsy and purchase my class called The Ultimate Guide to Sewing Knits. And there's a whole lesson on sewing sweater knits. So I think that's an interesting class because it goes from, every lesson is dealing with a different weight of sewing knits, from tissue weight all through the various varieties of knits, all the way up to very, very heavy knits. And sweater knits are not at the top of the heavy category of knits, but they're getting there. Although today I'm going to be talking about sweater knits that are not super bulky, but they're nevertheless, they are a jersey sweater knit, meaning that they look like they look like you've knitted them. Very tiny needles, of course. You have a vertical knit stitch on the top side and a more purl type stitch on the wrong side. So that's what we're talking about today. So I want to compare the two garments that I have on, or that I'm showing you here. I have on the original Madrid as if you were to make it out of the package. But the one that I particularly like and wear even more is this one. So you can see the comparison here. Let me just go ahead and I'm just going to button this up as if it were like you would make it. 2 more buttons and buttonholes on the collar. All right, here we go. But you can see on this one, I did not put the buttons on the collar, and I wear it open, either splayed open like that, or you can, soften it a little bit around your neck, but the buttons are gone. And so if you wear a t-shirt or something underneath it, a turtleneck, a funnel neck, whatever, then you can see it, and it adds a little bit of adventure to the neckline of this Madrid. In this case, this has been displayed over a trio top, which is also in a sweater knit, by the way. It's a trio t-shirt, which is one of our download patterns, and it's a great t-shirt to wear with it because it's pretty slim, actually. There's quite a bit of room in the bust area of the trio t-shirt, but then it gets a little bit shaped and a little fitted around the hips. So it has the presence of the buttons. Now, in the original pattern, there is a band on the left front only, and that separate band extends up into the collar. Well, on this one, because of the knit and the fact that it's a sweater knit, I chose to eliminate that band and just extend the left front and turn it under and top stitch it. I think it's a little better application for this kind of knit. The other thing that I've done, now I'm wearing this over a black t-shirt and black pants, so there's a certain amount of disguise with that. But when I'm wearing this, and Madrid's in other colors, I like to cover up that tummy area a little bit more, so I extend the right front. And in this case, I've extended it about 2 inches by lengthening it. And the lengthening happens at the bottom of this lower right piece. There are lengthen and short lines throughout this pattern, but in this case, I've just lengthened it right at the bottom. So there are, how many changes? Is that 3 changes? 4 changes? 4 changes. I can't count that many. There's no buttons here, elimination of the band, and the lengthening.
And then the changing of how we did the hems.
Oh, yes. So the hems in this, thank you very much, Erin. That's right. So when working with the sweater knits, it's all about trying to reduce the bulk. And the pattern instructions for the Madrid have you turn these hems twice. We're turning them once, finishing the edges and turning them once. So, of course, it's easy to delete the buttonholes and buttons on the collar. But this, you have to do a little bit of math and calculation on this. And so Erin and I were yesterday kind of rethinking how I had done this some time ago, and we realized that we need to extend this front 1 5/8 inches. And so you have to take into account that you have an added band that you're not going to put on there. The seam allowance of this still exists. How much do you want to turn it under? And all of those come into play when you're trying to calculate how much to add. This edge has actually been turned 1 1/4 inches and then top stitched at 1 inch. The hem, which is normally a double fold hem, is simply serge finished and turned once. Now, we talk about knits as not raveling, and of course sweater knits don't really ravel, but they don't have a great edge on them when left raw. So many times when we're working with knits, we can just leave the edges raw, and I do that much more than I used to. You know, it's one thing to look at the inside of a knit garment and realize that you finished the edges nicely and it looks great on the inside, but that serged edge can be just bulky enough that sometimes you can see that through the sort of show through, we'll call it. And so we eliminate that on standard lightweight and tissue weight knits. But on a sweater knit, I feel like because the edges can, not what I call ravel, but the threads can come loose and even run, so to speak, like the old stockings used to run. And so I think that finishing the edge is really essential. Now, when you're finishing the edge, you want to use a 3-thread stitch formation on your serger. And of course, I talk about isocord thread all the time. And for those of you who are just joining and have never heard me tout the use of isocord, I'm going to go over it again. But isocord is a thread that is used for machine embroidery. So it has a little bit of a sheen to it, and it is very, very thin. And when you walk into a store and ask to purchase some isocord for serging, most dealers are going to say that you can't do that. But I'm here to tell you that you can. It's a beautiful thread, and I use it all the time on my serging, and particularly on something like a sweater knit or something bulky, because it does not add extra bulk to the edge, but it cleans up those edges and wraps those edges nicely. And when you work and get a nice balanced stitch for your serger, then it's going to be beautiful. So isocord comes in 480 colors or something like that. I buy 3 threads, 3 spools. I think there's like, I've forgotten, 1,100 yards on a spool. It lasts forever. And so I just keep an assortment of isocord threads in my stash, and I tend to have the colors that I need all the time. Now, there's nothing wrong with using polyester thread, which you're going to use on sweater knits, also in your serger, regular polyester thread. But I just like the fineness and the slight sheen of that isocord. But either way, what I don't use are the sort of fluffy, less expensive, standard serger threads. I just have eliminated those from my life, and I think that they, first of all, kind of muck up my serger, and they're not as pretty on the edge. So think about that. The standard seam finish for sweater knits is generally sewing the seam together and then 3 threads serging, fairly narrow, the edges together. And you can see that I leave a fair amount of seam allowance. I don't cut off a ton. I just cut off maybe about 1/8 of an inch and leave a pretty good 1/2 inch seam allowance from my 5/8 seam allowance. And I try to get this serger part as narrow as possible. I never use 4 threads on finishing. It's always 3 threads. 4 threads for me is for construction. That's a whole other topic. But 3 thread is for finishing, and the narrower the better, because you want less thread. And the only time I would widen this is if I'm working on a really, really bulky sweater knit and the serging is falling off of the edge and you need to widen it to be sure and grab more fabric. But try it, make some samples, and see how it goes. Now, if it's super, super bulky and you have certain areas where you think a doubled seam is too bulky, then there's nothing wrong with finishing each raw edge, sewing the seam, and pressing the seam open. But whenever possible, this is where I go with my sweater knits. All right, so back to, let's see, other sewing. You have to be somewhat careful on sweater knits about the pressing. Because they tend to be a little bit lofty, and a lot of them have polyester in them, you don't want to get your iron too hot. You want to use some steam. You want to use a press cloth perhaps. And I do a lot of steaming and hand pressing. And I'm using all of my tools. I'm using sleeve boards, tailoring boards, tailoring hams, all of those tools that help keep the shape of things, particularly when I'm sewing darts or curved seams. You don't want to flatten things. And remember that sweater knits and all knits can have a nap that you may not see when it's flat on the table, but when it's vertical, if you've cut the pattern pieces, by turning them, you might see a change in shading. Well, remember to put your pattern pieces all in the same direction, but also don't overpress because you're going to get some shine. So steaming mostly, light pressing, pressing cloth, hand pressing, that's going to be your friend. All of the knits that I'm going to show you today have some polyester in them, and almost all of them have nylon, which is a fiber that we don't think of as being, really all that great, but I'm here to tell you that nylon is what helps give the stability to these knits and the recovering property so that when they will stretch, they'll go back into shape. So don't be afraid of a little bit of nylon in these knits. I think it's a good property to have. So the ones I'm going to show you today are rayon, polyester, and a little bit of nylon, and a couple of them have spandex in them. So, all right. One of the things that you need to pay particular attention to is making the buttonholes on a sweater knit, because the buttonholes tend to get buried in the depth and the nap of the sweater knits. So you want to do a lot of tests. So I always like to show my samples. So I have 5 pages here of tests. So I start out by just making a buttonhole on a sample, just duplicating the number of layers and the direction that I'm going to be stitching the buttonhole. So if this buttonhole is slightly on the diagonal, I'm going to make a test buttonhole on the diagonal. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but on these tests there are puckers at the top and the bottom of those buttonholes. And I don't really like that because that only gets worse with time. I don't know, can you see that, Erin? Does it even show up?
A little bit.
A little bit?
See if I can get a little closer.
Yeah. So just make a test and see what happens. If it stretches out, which it's likely to do, then you need to think about how to stabilize these buttonholes. So this was just test number 1, standard buttonhole. Test number 2, I used some paper as a stabilizer on the back side, and it's better. Test number 3, I lengthened the stitch a little bit so it wasn't so dense, the zigzag stitch. Now I'm using a stretch buttonhole. I have that feature on my sewing machine, and if you have that feature, I suggest you use it. I had never used it in all of the years and years and years of owning these fancy sewing machines, but that buttonhole exists. It's one of the 9 different buttonholes that I have as an option on my sewing machine. So remember that it's there for a reason. It's a totally different kind of stitch than a zigzag. It's a little more open, but it's real secure. So for this one, I have interfacing all of a sudden in my turn back. I have the stretch buttonhole. I also have paper. And the very last one, I had all of that, plus I had paper on the top. So by the, whatever that is, 6th or 7th or 8th test, I'm happy now to make my buttonholes. So be sure and get it to the point where you're satisfied. But one other thing that you can do on a buttonhole that is problematic and really going to stretch out, because as you know, as you continually button and unbutton something like a sweater knit, the buttonhole is going to increase in size. So I like to stabilize a buttonhole with pearl cotton. And in my buttonhole foot, I can lay the pearl cotton through a little channel, and the stitch will go over that pearl cotton. Now I haven't pulled this yet so you can see it, but when this is all said and done, I would pull these 2 tails and bring this loop down so it's hidden, and then I would cut away these tails. I would also have chosen to use perhaps a more matching thread size. It doesn't have to be pearled cotton, just something a little bit heavier, maybe a buttonhole twist or 2 or 3 strands of polyester. Just get some additional thread in there to help stabilize it. It really makes a huge, huge difference. So that is all about buttonholes for knits. Okay, so we have put together a really special tutorial for you that talks about the Sweater Knit Madrid. It gives you instructions on how to add the 1 5/8" to the left front of this piece, eliminating the placket band that comes as a pattern piece. It gives you complete instructions on adding the 2 inches across the bottom of the lower right front. It talks about adding an 1 5/8" to the collar piece because you want this to be, of course, the same width. And of course, it mentions not to put the buttons and buttonholes in the collar. And then it's a whole other series included in the tutorial of all about making buttonholes in knits. It's a 25-page PDF tutorial, and we're offering it today at a really, really special price. And I hope you'll take advantage of it. All right, so do we have any questions at this point? Oh, wait, I have clothes to show. What am I talking about?
But do you want to do buttonhole questions? Since we
Yeah,
did have
we can
a
do
few
that. Sure.
questions about buttonholes. Okay. What do you know what the number is for the stretch buttonhole?
You know what, I do not. I have not looked at that for a long time.
Or maybe kind of what it might look like or anything?
It is instead of a stitch that goes back and forth like this, there's a bit of a zigzag that crosses over, and then it has a lead thread on the very edge on the inside of the buttonhole.
Do you use the pearl cotton first as a stabilizer before you stitch your buttonhole, or is the pearl cotton the only thread you need for the buttonhole?
The buttonhole is still in my matching thread. The pearl cotton is an additional thread that is on top and through my presser foot. And so you're stitching over the pearl cotton with your regular buttonhole. You won't see it when it's done, but it is not your buttonhole thread. It's not making the buttonhole. It is stabilizing the buttonhole.
What about wash away stabilizer?
You can use wash away stabilizer. I just tend not to want to wash my garment the minute I get done. So I like to tear things away. The paper that I use is usually the tissue paper left over from patterns, and it just goes away. Once you pull the paper off, you might see a little bit of it in the stitching on the wrong side, even on the right side, but within a couple of buttonings and maneuvering the fabric, it's gone.
Is the shape of the neckline found on any other patterns? I like how the collar drapes on the gold jacket, but the angled side is not compatible with my figure.
No, this neckline isn't really on any of our other patterns. But you could put it on any of the other patterns. You know, you can always transfer necklines. Take the neckline from the Madrid and put it on, let's see, the London, for example, which has a similar, sort of similar collar. And just retrace necklines, and you can trace collars. So it's pretty easy to transfer neckline shapes to other patterns.
I wonder if it could be similar, maybe it's more dropped, but with the now has that kind of...
It is a little bit similar to the now, that's correct. This is lower than the now, but it's very similar. You could lower the now.
True,
and get the same look. Yeah, exactly.
Are you stitching with a regular machine straight stitch on the sweater seams? I would get pop seams, and triple stitch doesn't give a smooth seam.
Right. First of all, I do not use the standard knit stitch that comes on the sewing machine as a seam. That is too dense and totally impossible to dig out of any fabric, and particularly a sweater knit. I'm using a straight stitch. I'm using polyester thread, which has strength. Now, take a look at this garment. This garment is loose fitting, and there's little chance of pop stitches. You're only going to get pop stitches when you are making a skin tight pair of yoga pants or a tight sweater, but there's so little chance of pop stitches. But I use a straight stitch. I do not use a small zigzag, although that's an option, and I talk about that in the book. If you need that extra give in a vertical seam, fine. But I use a straight stitch, standard 2.4 millimeter straight stitch in polyester thread, and I never have pop stitches.
Do you keep all of your sample pages after the garment is complete?
Obviously I do.
I think a notebook or something.
Yeah, I have a notebook of things. I have a reason to save my samples. I like to rehash them and talk about them with you all later. I don't know. I suppose if you are never going to sew on something again, maybe not. But it seems to me like a little library of samples is something to really refer to, and it's a great thing to keep, either in a 3-ring binder or a box or a notebook of some kind. I would think so.
Can you repeat what your stitch length is?
My stitch length is 2.4 millimeter.
With drop shoulders, like on the London shirt, I have had problems with a very obvious and bulky seam line when I don't have problems on other seams. Would this be an issue with the Madrid, and do you have any ideas?
So I'm assuming you're talking about this seam being prominent. Well, it may be that you are trimming it too closely. Maybe this is a seam you don't serge. Sometimes I don't finish this seam. Now, in regular fabrics, like a woven fabric, I might even use pinking shears to trim this seam, because that really settles things down and flattens them. So I either would consider serging the two seam edges separately, not serging them at all, pinking them, and not trimming them too close. I think when we get it too close, that forms a lump. So hopefully those are some suggestions for you.
Do you use isocord in your loopers and needles?
I use isocord in all the loopers, both loopers and the needle as well, all three.
Do the spools come, the isocord spools, do they come in bigger spools?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think isocord is one. Erin, there might be a spool possibly in that little basket right there.
I think they do actually, because we got some in stock one time in black.
That's right. So
I think they do have a bigger spool.
So this is the size of standard spool, and this is 1,000 meters. And I don't know the calculation, but that could be 1,100 or so yards, something like that. And you're right, Erin, we did get some in, and they were a taller spool, and I have those in black. I don't know if they have all 480 colors in those large spools. We'd have to check that out. But this is called Isocord 40.
A lot of good response with isocord, so it sounds like people are switching over. Can you use a cover stitch on the hems?
Absolutely, you can use a cover stitch on the hems. I made this before I even owned a cover stitch machine, probably. But I use my cover stitch machine now all the time on knits. Very much so. And let me talk a little bit about that. If I were doing a cover stitch on a bulkier fabric, I would use a wider needle setting rather than the narrow. I would want to be sure that as I'm stitching on the right side of the fabric, that I've got enough width of the needle that I'm catching the raw edge on the wrong side. And I think the widest setting would be the best on that, when I normally use the narrower setting on finer knits.
Are the corners mitered?
The corners are not mitered. This is a hem this bottom first, and then turn this back. You could, but you know what? I think that would be even bulkier. Although not impossible. Yeah, you could do it.
The other one is mitered.
Is the other one mitered? This one is mitered, yes. Oh, yes.
And then the one by the buttonholes.
Yeah. That's pretty good, actually.
You did a good job.
This one's mitered too, now that I look at it. Well, never mind what I just said. I could have mitered this one. So this is the asymmetric miter, where you have a narrower hem coming into a wider hem. And this is a symmetrical one where both hems coming into the point are the same width. So all of those are in the instructions and also in our Mastering Miters book and various tutorials.
And the sleeve, what kind of sleeve is it? There was a question on whether it was a raglan sleeve, but...
No, this is not a raglan sleeve. This is just a standard. I can't remember the construction on this, whether it's set in flat or in the round.
I don't remember. You'd think it would have been flat.
Well, I can look and find out here real quick. Flat.
Okay. And you extended the left front how much?
1 5/8 inch. So I didn't have to put the band on it. Normally the band goes clear into the collar, but in this case I have seamed the edge of the collar, top stitched at the same width, and just turned back. Here's what this looks like on the inside. Let's look at it. So the collar has now a seam to it, and this is turned back 1 1/4 inches.
Okay. What size do you have on versus the one that's on the dress form?
Both of them are a small. Let me make sure here. Yes, both are a small.
There's a question from Julia Olson, and I'm going to ask you to resend it because I don't quite understand. It says, do you tie the end? To me, it seems like it would come loose. It's a little stiff. But she also used the word icicle, so I'm a little confused. So if you could resend that question, that would be great.
Do I tie the end of the isocord? Is it about isocord?
She could have meant isocord.
Oh.
Maybe after you're done serging.
It depends. Okay, that probably is the question. Isocord, you're right, has a tendency to ravel out. So I have to think about whether a seamed edge is going to be crossed by another seam. If it's being crossed by another seam or hem or something like that, then I don't bother to tie or finish the ends of the isocord. But if the serging is at the end of something, then instead of tying it, I will thread the tails through a large eye needle and take the ends of that thread back through and under the serging on the wrong side for 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and then cut them off. And that finishes it nicely. It's rare that serging ends, I mean, everywhere that I can think of on here, the ends are being tied into something else. It's being covered. I can't think of any situation on this garment where the serging ends and is exposed. Somebody's going to prove me wrong about that, but I think I'm right.
Do you use the same color in your loopers and needle?
Well, the real answer is yes, I try to, but the truth is I occasionally don't have 3 totally matching. And I might be off on one color a little bit in shade. I mean, it's not like I'm using 2 reds and a green, but I might use 2 reds and a pink. And so if I have an off color, I'm using that in the needle. Or sometimes the lower looper if I'm not going to see the serging at all. Kind of depends on the situation. But I try to get close. But it's every once in a while I'm mixing it just a little bit, just in tone and shade. I don't try to do that, but it happens.
Do you use a wide or a narrow 3-thread serge?
I use a narrow 3-thread, just almost, I would say 90%. It's rare. The only time I widen my stitch on a serger is if I am having trouble. and things are not behaving and I can't get the stitch balanced or to keep from torquing something, and then I'm messing around with width, differential, balance, needles, thread, all of it to try to get it. And occasionally I'll make it wider, but it's pretty rare.
Can you show the Madrid unbuttoned?
Sure. Now let me address something. I've never thought about this before, but for the person who doesn't like the diagonal, I don't see any reason why you couldn't cut the right fronts again and make it a left front and turn it into a center button cardigan.
That's a good idea.
It's like, what a good idea.
That'll be your next project.
Well, then you don't have to transfer the neckline to the now. You've got it right there. You can even put these pattern pieces together, tape the upper right front and the lower right front together and just have a solid piece. I might have to do that. Actually, that's pretty nice. Yeah. Now you notice that the front is shorter than the back. You don't even have to do that. You can either shorten the back or lengthen the front and make them the same length. You can leave a vent if you want to. I do like the seaming detail of the back that has this diagonal seam, and that comes back again in the front. So I think if you were making this in a solid color and you had this on both sides, it would be kind of interesting to see that seam line, but it doesn't have to be there.
Do you use isocord on pants seams? I'm finding it a little rough on the inseams.
I use isocord everywhere, always. You're finding it rough on the inseam? That's interesting because I think it's the smoothest of all of the threads. So I'm wondering if it's not your fabric that's rough, not the thread. I'd be surprised if it's the thread. Or you're not getting your stitch close enough together and you're getting little whiskers of fabric peeking through the serging. Try closing and making the serging a little denser. See if that works.
Are darts hidden in the seams of the front?
There are no darts on this garment.
I think maybe she's just seeing the seams.
This is a seam. Yeah, no darts.
What fabric is the Madrid that you're wearing?
This is a fabric that we had a long time ago, actually. It's a polyester something or other, novelty sweater knit, but we don't have it anymore.
What do you do with the ends of the cording in the buttonholes?
You cut it off. So this loop, I don't want to ruin my sample exactly, but you can see that I can pull that down so that the loop will be hidden in the cross stitching. And so then I would take some really fine scissors and trim those away. Trim there and trim there.
Okay, so you do trim the top as well.
Well, if I am seeing it, but you shouldn't be seeing it. But if you are, trim it. But shouldn't have to.
Thought there was another question, so let's see. Could you use a boiled wool for the Madrid?
A boiled wool in Madrid would be fabulous. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live here in a month or so on our bouclés that are essentially a boiled wool. They look like a boiled wool, but this would be beautiful in a boiled wool. Which, I think the last time I showed this garment, I may have shown the other fabrics. I literally have one in chiffon. that I wear over, obviously, another garment. And so you're talking about boiled wool, which is the opposite end of the spectrum. I can't think of very many fabrics that you can't use for this garment. I think it'd be fun in cottons, linens, knits. Doesn't have to be a knit. Certainly have made our share in wovens as well.
Okay, that's all I see.
All right, well, I'm going to show you some other garments that can be made in sweater knits. So Deb made a marceau. Now the marceau normally has a seam down the front and those shifted left and right sides, but she has eliminated the front seam and the back seam. But you know, the great detail of the marceau is this sleeve that has this undersleeve and a couple of pleats, and she's used a contrast for the bottom band and the cuffs and this. I think this is really, really cute. But this is, oh, look at this. I hadn't seen this. She's done a, probably with her cricket.
Oh, maybe. That's
yeah,
really cute.
she uses that a lot. That's really cute. But this makes me want to make a sweater. I've got my color in mind. It's on the wall. So
Leave Linda a little bit.
yeah, I hope. This is the West End top. We talk about the pants all of the time, but this has the front zipper, has bottom band, back seam, and of course the hood. And what better fabric to use than a sweater knit, which is what this is. This sweater knit is virtually the same knit that, in fact, I think it is the same knit that we have on the wall, a different color, obviously. So it's perfect for a lightweight sweater. You can wear it over a long sleeve that comes out of this sleeve, or you can lengthen this sleeve. This is the Barcelona that I think would be fantastic in a sweater knit. This is actually a French terry, but a sweater knit would be perfect. And you can put this drawstring on the bottom, or you can not. We have a couple of jackets. The E jacket is a really interesting two-piece garment where the front and the collar are all one, and the back and the sleeves are all one pattern piece. So this is a quick sew and a nice little kind of cute little jacket. This is a lengthened E shrug in a sweater knit. And when you buy the E shrug pattern, you get the instructions for how to lengthen the pattern. It's super easy. It has this nice front drape. These are all raw edge. This particular sweater knit looked good raw edge, so we left it raw. But you could do a traditional hem on it if you chose to, or just serge the edges and leave it. A sweater dress, the Memphis dress, would be really fun. It has all kinds of possibilities for color blocking, but it's just a really sophisticated dress in a solid color. Wear this with tights, booties, boots. And of course, our latest new digital pattern, the Haiku 2 jacket would be fantastic in a sweater knit. These sweater knits look good on both sides. So if you take the lapel and put it to the right side, that would work on this. This one happens to go to the inside, but the pattern actually has the lapel to the right side, and so a sweater knit would be perfect. So those are some other possibilities for you. All right, you want to look at fabrics?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one category of fabric that is most of the samples here, and these are the rayon and nylon and polyester. 42% rayon, 39% polyester, 29% nylon. But look at the drape on these, and they're just beautiful. They have a very slight sheen to them, and they're so soft. You just I don't know, this is just my kind of sweater. You know, I love wool, can't always do it. So we have the plum color in that fabric. We have this beautiful teal, pine, and the other colors, I'm going to make you move, Erin. In the same fabric, we have navy. What do we call this color? Dusty blue and moss green. I'll let you guys guess which color my Marceau is going to be. So all of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 6 colors in that variety of knit. And that's the same variety of knit that was used for this right here. So you can see the drape of the garment. So then we have a couple of pieces of the rib knit that I used for the Madrid. We have a couple of cuts left of the gold. And we have this dark green. We call it pine green. So the rib is a little bit different on each side. You can choose which side you want to use, whether it's the dominant rib side or a little bit smoother on the other side. It doesn't really matter. This is probably the right side, but again, it wouldn't matter. Oh, I forgot about this one. Is this the same? I don't know. I think this is the same as this. Not sure about that, but we have this in a more terracotta color. Then we have a couple of cuts of this one, which is quite interesting because it has 2 definite sides to it, a deep plum and a lighter plum, and it has an embossed diagonal, kind of almost stamped looking texture to it. One heather side and the other side is not heathered, it's solid. But these that are hanging here, we have a couple of cuts, 2.5 yard cuts of each of those. And then we have this interesting gray, which is two-tone, has a mottled appearance to it. And this is a different fiber. This is tencel, lyocell, and cotton. So it's extremely drapey, extremely soft. All of these are washable, wash and dry beautifully. So I think you're all good to go for this season. I know I'm gearing up to, well, I should look over here so you won't buy the color I want, but so there we go. So any questions? Any more questions?
Someone said that you should do the blue.
The blue? Yeah, I do like blue now. I had a car this color, and it was my first venture into blue. And yeah, I'm in the blue now.
How do you lengthen the sleeves on the E-shrug?
How to lengthen the sleeves on the E-shrug. Okay, so you measure from, well, first of all, yeah, that is a set-in sleeve. So you would measure from your bone here to what length that you want. You would take the sleeve pattern, and so it's sitting on your table, and you're going to measure, put some paper behind it and measure that length. And then you need to decide how much circumference you want, and you would draw a horizontal line, that circumference plus a couple of seam allowances, and then you reconnect that to the top of the underarm.
And we do.
I can only do that just so much with my arms.
And
we have that. Is that in our anatomy of a sleeve tutorial, how to lengthen a sleeve? It might be.
Well, and I'm pretty sure it's in the E-shrug pattern too. So how to lengthen the sleeve and how to lengthen the garment.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, the buttons on the Madrid.
Yeah.
Do we still have those?
We probably do. You know, if you ever want buttons, we don't have buttons on our website, but we have lots of buttons. And Deb can always help you with buttons. All you have to do is call her, email her, deb@sewingworkshop.com, and say, I just ordered this fabric, I need 5 buttons or whatever. And she'll send you some pictures of some options and then send you some buttons. We probably have these buttons.
I think we do.
Yeah.
Because she was looking for buttons yesterday, and I think
Yeah.
she saw we had those. Let's see. Would the Helix Tee work in a sweater knit?
Oh, yes. The Helix Tee and a sweater knit would be fabulous. Yep.
Is the E-jacket lined?
No, the E-jacket is not lined, and what is deceptive about this is a fabric, a sweater knit that is two-sided. So one side's black and one side's blue. So if you make it in any of these sweater knits, it's going to be the same color on both sides.
Could you reduce the number of buttons?
Sure.
Because you did from the original.
Okay, I think this has fewer buttons than this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have already reduced the number of buttons on this garment from the original. You can have no buttons. I would think that 5 would be maybe minimum.
Someone used snap tape on their Madrid. It was a woven Madrid, but that's
Nice.
That's a great idea.
That's interesting that you got that snap tape to curve. Good for you.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go over some of the fabrics
All right.
and see if I can get the most accurate color, because it did shift kind of where you go, it shifts. Just
You want me to get out of the way?
So I'm going to see if I can get
Maybe
it.
we find that when I stand in a certain color.
Because they do appear a little brighter right now.
Okay.
And Betsy did link to all the fabrics, and the color is accurate on the products.
Okay.
So, but yes, they do appear a little brighter right now than they actually are. Would the sweater knit be good for a Eureka style vest?
Absolutely. I think we've shown the Eureka vest in a couple of sweater knits, and I almost brought it today, but we so talk about the Eureka all the time that I thought, oh, surely I don't need to show it again, but obviously I did need to bring it and show it. But yes, it would make a great garment. There are really a lot of garments. I mean, the pearl jacket would be great, the opal jacket. I could go on and on with the Alex and the olive, and I can't think of too many of our patterns that we can make in knits that wouldn't be great in this weight of a sweater knit.
What size are the buttons? I don't know. I think talking about the gold.
Well, I don't know what the pattern calls for, but these are about 5/8 inch, if not 3/4. These are smaller. So I think the size kind of depends on how many you're putting on. But
yeah, it's 1/2 inch on the pattern.
Okay.
And I do think those are 5/8. But I think with any pattern, you might have to adjust depending on what buttons you're using. Do you have any sweater knits in cottons?
Well, I will tell you this. I pulled out most of our solid sweater knits here. We have a lot of printed sweater knits, which is going to be another topic at another time. Some of those could be cotton. I don't know. We do have some really nice all cotton knits that I don't know that I would describe them exactly as sweater knits, but they are heavier knits, and the patterning on them is very simple and very geometric. Maybe Betsy could give you a link to one of them. I think we have one in kind of an eggplant, and one in a black and white, an eggplant and something. So hopefully Betsy knows what I'm talking about and can give you a link, and that might lead you to a whole category if I think they're all cotton knits. We also have the kits that were available for the Haiku 2 jackets were a cotton sweater knit, and we may have a little bit of yardage of a couple of colors of those left. They're a jacquard cotton knit that I would consider sweatery.
Okay, Betsy just linked
Okay.
to those. Looks like one more question. Is the gray sweater knit. Is it gray or taupe?
It is definitely gray. 2 tones of gray, light and dark.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so on sale today for the week, all of the fabrics that I've mentioned, including the cuts, the Madrid pattern, which is print only, and 1 tutorial. The sewing Madrid, Sweater Knit Madrid is $5. Now that's a 25-page PDF tutorial, and for this week, we're offering it for $5. It'll go back to its regular price after that, but it's a great bargain for buttonholes and how to make this adjustment to this Madrid.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.